And one thing I want to do tonight is teach you all something that I think is very powerful and it's very free. And it's called breath work. How many people in here do yoga? Okay, a large number of you. Well, one of the big principles of yoga is breathing, because the technique of breathing is very important. And we learn this as babies without even being taught. And one of the principles you watch when you see a baby breathe is that the baby uses their belly, and the belly comes out and the belly goes in, and they do this normal rhythmic function. As we get older, we get stressed and everything's hustle and bustle and a lot of things are going on. The next thing you know, people are breathing with their upper chest, and they're splinting and they're breathing much more slowly, or sometimes more fast depending on what's happening. What goes on with this is something called sympathetic tone, and I'm going to briefly show you guys how to try and reverse this, because there's a very important problem happening in our world that I'm acutely aware of now, and that's fast-paced society with no understanding of relaxation. And this is a very easy way to relax. And what it does is that if you groove it in on a daily basis, I usually do it 2 to 3 times a day, it's very quick, you actually will reverse your neurologic tone to be more relaxed. So it's very, very powerful, and yoga is a primary way. It comes from India, the country, and it's a version of pranayama. It's called the 4-7-8 technique, and I'm going to show you all how to do it, and I want everyone to do it at least twice so they get the rhythm. You may feel a little lightheaded the first time you do it. This is actually not abnormal. Your blood pressure, your heart rate, everything drops when you do this because that nervous system kicks in and fixes it. So the principle is real simple. You breathe in for the count of 4 through your nose, hold your breath for the count of 7, and then breathe out through your mouth for the count of 8. So it goes something like this. Anyone feel a little different? Practice it. If you have arrhythmias, anyone in the room has mitral valve prolapse who gets SVT? I do. This actually helped me cure mine. There's all kinds of arrhythmias, all kinds of different things that happen in life, and everything is based on fight or flight. So that's just your freebie for the day. Now we're going to go to the talk. Ansel Adams, beautiful, beautiful picture. No other reason. Okay, disclosures. You know, we're always supposed to do these disclosure things. I have no disclosures. All the money I get goes to my wife, so it doesn't really matter. Nobody's paying me to be here, so, you know, that's what that is. As John said, I'm an integrative pediatrician. I'm actually falling more towards what's called functional medicine now, which is a combination of old school medicine and new school medicine, which everything is based on function. My primary principle understanding now of disease is it's not based on one thing anymore. So if you have insulin problems, diabetes, everyone thinks it's only the pancreas. Well, there's a lot more to it than that. And we're finding out now that everything's connected, and that's functional medicine, integrative medicine. It's looking at the whole. Instead of going into the doctor and saying, I've got arthritis, and you get put on a drug for arthritis, what else is going on in your life? Let's look at the whole picture and try and figure out what else can be triggering this. We all know if you have Crohn's disease, one of the first things that happens when you get stressed is your disease flares up. What is that? Is it just random, or is there a connection? And there's a connection. Your brain, your gut, everything's connected. Integrative medicine. Natural design. That's why I named this talk, and I've given it a bunch of times. I am a huge fan of nature. I think nature leads us in every way possible with the right answers. If you just look outside, you'll generally find the answers. Kids know this. They spend all their time walking around looking at stuff. When we get older, we sort of give up on the simple things, and everyone tells us, stop and smell the roses. There's a reason for that. Nature teaches us, and we stop learning, and we got to go back to learning. 4 different tigers. Genetically, very similar, but they all have different coat colors. It's a genetic difference called a phenotype. It's what they look like. The genotype is very similar, but the phenotype came out a little different. We're going to talk a little bit about genetics. I'm going to try not to kill you all tonight with science, but I think everyone needs to learn a little science to understand this stuff. How many people in the room are PhDs or MDs or anything like that? That's a fair amount. How many people are just general moms and dads who want to learn? How many people are anything else? What category are you? Anyone?
Charles Darwin.
Very well. Charles Darwin. Brilliant man, way ahead of his time. A lot of the things he did, there was a great National Geographic article about, I think think it was 9 months ago, that if you haven't read it, get it, read it. They did a really nice discussion on Charles Darwin and how he was so far ahead of himself. We're proving now how right he was, and it's very fascinating. Plan of this talk. I want you guys to understand how the environment influences human health in the 21st century. The environment. We're in the center for the environment. That's what we're going to talk about. Anything that externally influences your body, physical activity, nurturing, nature, toxins, pharma, herbs, you name it. Whatever happens to you, that's your environment that you live in. We're going to talk a lot about this. This is what's messing us up terribly. Mismatch of perceived environment and the place you find yourself in. When we were born, a lot of us had the genetic code from our mom because of where mom was in. And all of a sudden, we take and switch the environment. All of a sudden, the genes don't match up with the environment. Disease. Sorry if that comes out loud on that. Personal responsibility. I think our country's abdicated personal responsibility to a gross degree. And one of the things I want to talk about today is how we as a populace have to start taking personal responsibility for everything, for how we take care of people, how we take care of ourselves, how we eat, what we do with each other. I was walking in front of my favorite restaurant, Sweet Meadow Cafe, the other day, and some woman walks in front of me. I didn't know who she was. I hope she's not in the room. Threw a cigarette down. And one of my bad habits is I walk up and say, hey, I saw you drop that. Did you drop that on purpose? And she looked at me, he's like stunned. And I said, I'm sorry, I just noticed, I didn't think you wanted to dirty it, so I was going to tell you so you can pick it up, put it away. She picked it up, walked, put it away, and said, thank you, you're right. And so for what it's worth, I think we really need to work hard on teaching each other. And I think that was an example of teaching somebody in a polite way. I tried not to be mean. I touched her shoulder and said, it's okay, I just, don't do it. I'm a nutrition guy. My integrative fellowship, if it did anything for me other than learning about, how to be more relaxed and all those things, is it taught me nutrition. And nutrition, I'm convinced, is the key for all of us to correct ourselves, because we're unlikely to have a great impact in a very short term on a lot of the things that we're having problems with, pollution, these things. Although we need to work hard on them, it's going to be a lot of years before we fix a lot of the big problems we have, especially with China blowing everything over the ocean. We got a lot of problems. Nutrition we can fix, and we can fix it quickly. This data is going to scare you. I apologize in advance. This is some very scary data. This is straight off the CDC website. You can go to the website and pull up these maps. Okay, so we're looking at here is percent obese adults, BMI greater than 30. The categories shown right now are no data, less than 10% of the adults are obese, 10 to 14%, nothing else. I'm going to go in 2-year increments. Watch this. 88, 90. New category, 6 years. 15 to 19% now. 94, 96, new category. 12 years. Is that believable, just food alone? It's hard to imagine, to me, that eating that bad can do this that quickly. I don't think it's just food. I think food is a big problem, but I think there's other things going on that are messing us up, and it comes back to the genes again. 2000, 2002, new category, 1 in 4. 2004, 2006. Mississippi, West Virginia get the dubious distinction of 1 in 3 of adults are obese. 2007 is the last bit of data I have. West Virginia found a way to get back off. But I'm sure they're back on. No offense, West Virginia. The shape of things to come. Economist, 2003 magazine. I mean, this is 6 years ago. I mean, it's great. I mean, great parody, but the sad reality is that's what we're dealing with. And in our clinic, it's really just a very hard thing to watch, because when I started there in '99, we didn't have type 2 diabetics in children. We didn't even think about it. If you rolled in our office, and type 1 diabetes, sure. Okay, type 2, nah, it's adult disease. We have a clinic for it now. Dr. Hudson runs a clinic for kids with type 2 diabetes and obesity. It's amazing, 10 years. It's hard to fathom. This is my mad science, okay? You're not gonna have to understand this, but I'm just trying to tell you how complicated this is. This is disease, morbidity, and death. This is what I do in my spare time, so thank God you're not married to me. Bottom line is, this is what I believe is going on. Common themes of disease: poor nutrition, decreased sun exposure, decreased exercise, decreased psychosocial support, over-clean environment, chemical exposure. All of that is affecting the body in all these different ways that you won't have a quiz on. Change the way you think. Again, natural. I want everyone to think, how did nature intend us to live? What was our intent? Were we intended to drink Slurpees? Were we intended to work indoors all day long with sunscreen on if we go outside? No. Toxins? How are we supposed to eat? These are just what we're going to talk about. Anti-inflammatory diet, exercise, fatty acid profiles, 90-10 rule. I'm going to briefly talk about that because I'm not going to touch on it again. I'm convinced that if you eat well 90% of the time, your body will fix the other 10% if you screw up. Our body was intended to deal with problems. We just overloaded the system. The body can't handle the dam is crusted. You cut it back to 90-10, the dam can do its job again. And that's the way I try and teach people to think, because I think what messes most people up is if you say, you need to go on a strict diet. It's insanity. But if you say, hey, have your donut once in a while. Not every week, you know? All right, sun, cartoon, counterthink. The sun will kill you. Avoid skin cancer, use more sunscreen. Little kid. I have kids like that in my neighborhood. Keep up the good work, buddy. He's paying them off. You know, it's a parody, but the reality is the same as 70s, 60s, skin cancer came, and all of a sudden the next thing you knew, dermatologists were preaching like crazy. Don't let the sun touch your skin. Don't let the sun touch your skin. Don't let the sun touch your skin. We bought it. Bad idea. I didn't buy it, thankfully. I was one of these kids who didn't listen. Schlitz. Look at this one. This is great. They knew back a long time ago. Sun was important, and if you didn't have the sun, drink beer. It has vitamin D in it. Sources of vitamin D. Fish, chicken. You got from the eggs, and you got the cow over there with the milk, but primarily it's the sun. Map of the United States. In the wintertime, if you live below this line, you cannot adequately make vitamin D during the wintertime to support your body. If you live up in the north side of the country, Canada, oh man, you're in big trouble. This data actually came out of a bunch of studies that started to notice a corollary between disease and latitude. So the farther north you live, the more likely you were to develop autoimmunity. MS, Saskatoon, Canada. Louise Gahn is a famous doctor up there who started realizing there was an association between her little town in Canada and vitamin D deficiency and MS. And they started noticing this pattern. And Crohn's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, you started noticing it. Farther north you lived, the more trouble you had. Farther south you went, no big deal. Turns out, sun's the biggest issue. People were not getting sun exposure. We have a huge problem with vitamin D deficiency in this country. This is an environmental problem. And everywhere you go, we're still being taught, wear your sunscreen, wear your sunscreen. Now, I'm not advocating not wearing sunscreen. I'm advocating don't get burned. Let your kid run around for an hour like we're intended to. And then if they're going to spend more time outside because their environment doesn't match their genetics, getting back to that thing again, if your skin is dark, you're supposed to be living at the equator, you take them, move them up to New York. The skin is dark because the melanin increases to reflect the sun back. You take that person, move them to New York City, all of a sudden, how are they supposed to absorb enough sun? You take that very white person from northern Scandinavia and move them down to Tripoli, Africa, what happens? They burn to crisp. Mismatch perceived environment, real environment. It's a big thing going on. So keep that in mind. More gory details. What I wanted to show you is that most of the vitamin D you're going to make in your lifetime is going to come from the sun. The sun hits your body, cholesterol turns into a provitamin, then it comes through and your liver and your kidney do their job, and the next thing you know, you have active vitamin D. Active vitamin D used to be only believed to have effect on the bones. When I was in medical school, we were taught vitamin D just does bones. So if you control rickets, you're good to go. That's all we thought. So we had enough vitamin D in milk and things to fortify it to do a good job. Wrong. We were way off. Turns out that we have a vitamin D deficiency issue all over the world. And it's because at higher vitamin D levels where we're supposed to be, it affects your immune system and tumors. Leading cause right now believed to be of disease onset, vitamin D deficiency. Cancer, autoimmunity, huge, huge problem. I encourage everyone in this room to get your vitamin D level checked. It's never too late. It's a big issue. Environmental mess up. Pediatric News, May 2009. Low vitamin D in teens tied to hypertension. I mean, I could put up 100 articles. I mean, when I started talking about this 3 years ago, There was barely anything you could read. I went back to my old alma mater, UVA, and did a morning report, and the endocrinologist in the room laughed me out of the room. The endocrinologist, who is the guy who's supposed to know vitamin D better than anybody, said, that has no. Funny thing is now I've talked to him and he's like, wow, it's everywhere. But the reality is it's a very dogmatic issue that if you don't know the answer, we say no, but this is everywhere now. Vitamin D, type 1 diabetes, 128 type 1 diabetic patients, 76 not sufficient with 25 hydroxy vitamin D. The more deficient your levels are, the longer the duration of the disease and the worse outcome you have with hemoglobin A1C. And again, this could be Crohn's disease, this could be rheumatoid arthritis, you name the autoimmune disease, it's all going to be the same. Mendelian genetics. Gregor Mendel, old famous monk, 15th century or 16th century, figured out that if you take mom and dad, put them together, you get baby, and every time you do this, you get a gene pattern of mom and dad mixed, always. Mom and dad mixed, and you get a baby. And we always believe this was what's called deterministic. Deterministic means if mom and dad get together and you get a child, that's what you get. That's your book of life, that's what you're going to be. If mom had bad cholesterol and you're one of those kids, you got bad cholesterol, you can't change it. Wrong. This is what we were taught in med school, it is wrong. Okay? True, if you have, let's say, trisomy 21, Down syndrome, that's what you're stuck with. That's a gene switch change, you can't modify that. But everything else going on that potentially is high cholesterol, all these other things, we can modify that. And I'm going to talk a lot about that tonight. So this is just a cartoon I think is funny because the Jorgensens, you know, there's this amoebas and then you got the dinosaur and this kid's got a tail, so whatever. All right, I promise I'm not going to do a lot of hard science. Watson and Crick, DNA, unravels. Beauty of this whole thing is that the DNA as it's being read here, this is the book of life, and that book of life then goes on and produces proteins, and that's what does everything in our bodies. What's very interesting is when I was learning in medical school again, the DNA had these things called exons, which were this code that encoded for the protein, and in between these things called introns. Junk DNA. We were told it was junk, it's garbage. Who wants to tell me if God would put something there that was garbage? But we were taught this, it's junk, we don't need it, we're not using it. We're now proving that that's not true. This stuff is the information cycle that tells this to do what it's supposed to do or turn it off or on. So the way I like to explain this is, let me go here first. We'll skip this quickly, but protein functions, lots. If anyone wants this, I can give you later, but we don't need to belabor that. Places you can mess up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Amazing that our bodies do so many things right when there are so many places that it can go wrong. But this is where things like chemicals, all the stuff that happens to us in our body can actually get into the system and mess things up. All right, my favorite part. This is where, you know, I'm driving home in the car, I listen to this stuff, I get really excited, it's sort of scary, but epigenetics, new paradigm. We're going to talk about Randy Jourley and the Goody Mouse Project. We're going to talk about methylation in our diet. You guys are like, oh my God. Bisphenol A, opposite effect. Okay, epigenetics. What is it? Mendelian-wise, back in the day, you had your genes, and you had, you know, your book of life, and it was your book of life. It came from mom and dad, and that was it. It was determined, right? Okay. Epigenetics says there's a change to how that gene is played out, what comes out, but you don't do anything to the DNA sequence. So the book never gets rewritten. Does that make sense? The book is there, you're not rewriting the book, but you're actually changing how the book is read, so what comes out. The analogy I like to use, which I'm actually stealing from Randy Jourley, is it's a computer. Okay? You get a computer from Dell, and everyone gets the computer for Dell, and that computer is set up to do the way you wanted it. It's got all the programs already preloaded on it to do what you want. That's your computer. You can't change that, really. I mean, you can, but let's say for sake of argument, you can't change it. That's your book of life. That tells your body how to make a liver cell, how to make a heart cell, how to do anything. You take that heart cell out and you put it in a petri dish, and you let that petri dish go, it'll turn into a heart cell because that book of life says go be a heart cell. Okay? Epigenetics, above the genome, is the software that goes into that hardware. Now you can put in all kinds of software to tell that book of life to, let's read you a different way. Let's play you a different way. Let's do this different. That's how you can change. And this is what I'm going to try and impress upon everyone really powerfully tonight. This is the key to us, responsibility-wise, changing how we end up in the world. It's not determined anymore. You're not screwed because your mom and dad had bad genes. You can change a lot of this stuff. Fancy words, don't worry about it. This was actually I didn't change it from another lecture. We all make choices in life, some not so good. I've put these berries into piles according to which ones I believe are poison. Wow, I didn't know you could do that without actually eating them. Well, which is why I bring you here today. I mean, for centuries, people knew that ginger was good for them, but certain mushrooms were bad. How did they learn this stuff? I mean, trial and error, really. But interestingly enough, they realized that when they did take some of this stuff, bad things would happen, epigenetic phenomenon, okay? It is complicated. For me to simplify this down to you guys, just realize that I'm really simplifying it down. And the guys doing the heavy lifting, the guys who actually help me regurgitate this stuff to you, this is how complicated it is. Unbelievable how many factors and vitamins and minerals and everything that's involved in the cycles of life in our body. Hard to imagine. Agouti mouse, the seminal case in teaching us that what we were taught was wrong, okay? The agouti mouse is a mouse that is genetically predetermined, Mendelian-wise, to be this: fat, yellow, diabetic. Every time you take mom and dad, put them together, pregnant mom comes out with a fat, yellow, diabetic mouse. One day they did an experiment. They gave the mom a mouse when she was pregnant, folic acid, B12, vitamins, and choline. See what happens to the mice. The mouse came out brown, skinny, non-diabetic. If you believe Mendelian genetics, that's impossible. If you believe epigenetics, it's possible. What happened was, by giving a methyl group, which I'm going to explain a little bit, you actually changed how the book of life was read. Methylators essentially is you take a chromosome and it's unwinding to be read. If you put a methyl group on this thing, and don't worry about the details, what it does, it puts a don't read signal on that gene area. It says, don't read me, skip over me, move on to the next one. Don't read it. So if you have adequate methyl groups, in this case, the gene doesn't get read, you don't get the yellow diabetic mouse. Pretty interesting. All these things, acetylators, ubiquitinators, these are all driven by foods, of all things. Foods tell our body what to do. Now let me spin this on its head a little. Dana Dolinoy, another great researcher, doing some work, took endocrine disruptors, chemicals that mimic estrogen, let's say. Bisphenol A, everyone heard of bisphenol A? Plasticizers in the news, number 7 plastics taken out of baby bottles. Canada, Europe banned it, United States, we're still testing it. Banned now mostly because consumer-driven removal, not because the United States government did what we wanted to do. Nonetheless, it's coming out of our system. These are some of the things that have different stuff in it. What ended up happening was, I must have lost that slide, sorry. When they gave the bisphenol A to the agouti mouse, who wants to guess what happened to it? Fat, yellow, and diabetic. Why? It overcame the folic acid B12. Then they looked at it and said, well, what happens if you give more folic acid B12? Well, then it reverses the plasticizer. So now we're in a competition between food and chemicals to try and make our genes do what we want them to do. If you give too much bisphenol A to the body of a pregnant mama, don't care. You're not going to beat it. The baby's going to come out fat, yellow, and diabetic. So there's a balance here. And again, we're going back to nature. There's a balance. You want to limit as much as you can the things that are going to cause your body to read the book the wrong way. We want that book of life to be read the right way. Food, good. Chemicals, bad. Okay? One of the things that, when you look at this stuff that's very fascinating, chemicals are everywhere. We don't have any idea what half of these chemicals are doing to our bodies. And this is just one case now, and this is in a mouse. We have no idea what this does in a human. I'm extrapolating this data from from mice to humans and saying, this is probably what we're seeing in humans. This is all theoretical right now. But if it's me, I'm taking this theory and banking it and saying, I'm getting away from all this stuff as best I can. So in my house, I've literally removed plastics, don't cook in any plastics. I try and not drink out of plastic water bottles. I'm just saying, you know what, until they prove to me that all these other plastics that are out there are gonna be healthy for me, not messing with it. And again, that's probably an extreme version. But until I get some data that makes me feel a little bit better about this, I'm saying, you know what, I'm taking the high road and going the other way. I'm gonna try and be as natural as possible. I'm trying to go crazy, of course. You know, if I'm on an airplane, fine, I'll drink the darn water bottle, 90-10. But, you know, think. All right, asthma and pollutants. I had to throw this in there because I'm an asthma guy and I got to say something about asthma. This is a recent study I just found in pediatrics. Environmental pollutants increase the markers of inflammation in the lungs of children with asthma. Don't worry about them, that's what I care about. So we know this. This study was looking at it. They found that these environmental pollutants are increasing these markers in these kids. Move the child away from the urban city to a rural environment. They tested exactly how much pollutant was in each area. They did the whole well-done study. 1 week after, markers decreased tremendously. Okay? Irritant, pollutant, remove it, get better. Treatment plan, according to me, would be avoid the toxin if you can, and then look for your nutritional redux pattern. Okay? This is where I get into a lot of problems in my clinic because I have a lot of kids who won't do what I ask them to do. Stop eating McDonald's 5 days a week. How about 2 days a week? You know, and they come back in, they're sitting right on my little table there with a big gulp and a thing, and I'm like, oh, yay. So I end up having to use more medicine. But the reality is, data's pouring out. For the reason dinosaurs became extinct. You know, it's funny, it's a joke, but you know, the reality is there is data now out there that says that the generation of children being born today is likely not to outlive its parents the first time in the history of the United States. This is no joke. This is real. They had a symposium, I think it was 5 years ago, and the leading scientists in the United States stated that it is likely that the generation of kids, I think it's 0 to 20 right now, or 0 to 10, are not going to outlive their parents. Never happened before. Very sad. We're seeing it in our clinic. I mean, it's real. All right, who was here in January to the 10 American study? When Ken Cook was here. Okay, I'm gonna rip his data because I think it's great. I want to steal it and put it up here and let you guys see it. Whoever hasn't seen this, don't give the answer out, but this is powerful stuff. Ken Cook, for anyone who doesn't know, is the founder of EWG Environmental Working Group. Great website. It's a nonprofit organization. They put out lots of information about things from quality sunscreens to chemicals. They're working on the Kids Safe Act. They're very pro what you want, what I would consider all of us want to be in favor of. They took 10 human sources of blood and analyzed them anonymously. I think it was California-based blood, Kaiser Permanente system, and they looked at them for chemicals. They tested for 413 chemicals. In the blood of these 10 humans, they found 287 of these chemicals in doses high enough to potentially cause disease. You know, a dose of Paxil, one dose will be 30 parts per billion in the blood of an adult after it's done. A lot of the levels they found of these plastics were 40, 50, 60 parts per billion. Don't know what it's going to do to us yet, but boy, if Paxil works pretty good at 30 parts per billion, I'm a little scared at what happens with bisphenol A at 60. These were the 10 Americans. Babies. Cord blood analysis of newborns. Why is autism on the rise? Is it vaccines? I don't think so. There are so many things happening to mothers that they are unaware of because our environment is changing so rapidly without our knowledge. Worse diet, more exposure to bad things. I believe, without enough data yet to prove it, because we just don't have it yet, that this is probably where we're going to end up finding out where all these diseases are coming from. It's heavy exposure of stuff when the body can't handle it. The most critical time of development is that 9 to 10 month period in the first year of life, and then again when they go through puberty. That's when cells are turning over exceedingly fast. That is the time of life when things can go wrong. Strong evidence emerging, we're killing ourselves, data after data after data. There was a study I just recently looked at that had, I think it was perfluorinated carbons, hydrocarbons. Pregnant women who had higher levels of perfluorinated hydrocarbons had reduced ability to get pregnant. I mean, it's coming out because eventually the data is finally being looked at. I'm convinced the perfect storm now is poor nutrition, chemicals, behavioral, environmental stresses, abnormal and lateral life is the reason for a lot of our problems, and induced epigenetics with abnormal outcome. All comes back to epigenome. Michael Skinner, another great researcher, one of the founders of epigenetics, looked at estrogenic toxicants and exposure in utero of mice. And basically, what they looked at was essentially a scenario where when they changed something in the mouse mom, did it continue on generation after generation? So let's say bisphenol A, I think, was the one they used, or it might have been, this one might have actually been the chemical that they spray on mushrooms to keep them from getting pests on them. And they looked at this in the mouse and said, what happens? Well, the F1 generation, which is the first generation that's born, had the problem in the spermatic germ cell. They looked at the F2, F3, F4. None of those mothers were exposed to the chemical, still had the germline defect. So now they're realizing that this can be generational. So if you have a defect in the mom the first time, not only is it something that that person has to worry about, but all their offspring. So we could potentially be doing things to our bodies right now that our kids and our kids' kids and our kids' kids and our kids' kids are going to have issues with. Again, theoretical, still mice, but worrisome. Do I? I use soy, rice, almond all the time, but I don't drink much milk. I'm not a big... You know, that jury's still out. Japanese kids drink more soy per capita than anybody. Now, could there be a genetic ability for them to handle it more because they've been doing it for a lot longer? It's possible. And we know that they can metabolize genistein, which is one of the active proteins in soy, better than we can. But I'm not convinced that the phytoestrogenic effect, also plant estrogenic effect, is problematic. And I just came back from the big conference in May, in the Nutrition and Health Conference in Chicago, and that was asked about 5 different times, and it was pretty much summarily said, no, it doesn't look like it's real, but they're still looking at it. So I'm not convinced, but what I am convinced of is moderation is your best answer. So if you're going to drink 20 ounces of soy milk a day, probably not. You drink 6, 8, fine. I think so, but I think anything in too much is insane. And it just goes to show everywhere we turn, folic acid's real good to prevent neural tube defects in pregnant moms. What happened if we gave 5 grams? Well, it turns out that that's pro-cancer and a bunch of other stuff. A little bit good, a little bit maybe better, too much, usually never good. And so anytime anyone asks me these questions, just always think natural moderation, and that generally will get you through life pretty good. 10 beers, not so good. Developmental plasticity. Our bodies are plastic, and what plastic means is they're changeable. They're always changing. We're always trying to do things in life that make ourselves better, and our mind actually tries to follow that. Why is the person who's mentally always depressed and frustrated more sick versus the guy who's walking around happy all the time less sick? There's something about how the mind controls it. There's developmental plasticity. Things happen the way we want them to. We can change rapidly. The epigenome is showing us that. The code of life was put in place purposely to be able to change when the environment changes. The problem is we're messing it up. So let's say potato famine comes in, there's no more potatoes, and now we can only eat broccoli. The probability is the body will find a way to metabolize the broccoli and do what we need it to do and say, okay, we're fine without the potatoes. But I don't think our bodies were meant to detoxify as much stuff we're putting into it that's not natural. And then that's where the trigger comes in. So we want to go back to what I believe is nature. Nature has taught us everything. And this one is interesting again. Mismatch of perceived environment in infancy versus adult environment. They did studies and looked at retrospective review of mothers who were starved during the period of pregnancy, and they looked at their offspring. They had a much higher rate versus controls of obesity. So theoretically, you'd think, genetically, what happened was during that period of time of starvation, the newborn inside mom said, okay, I'm not getting a lot of food, I better learn how to hold on to food. Some people call this the thrifty gene concept. People who lived in starvation for long periods of time hold on to food very well. Now you take that person and put them in Wendy's for every day for 5 years, what happens? They hold on to food very well, and everything that goes along with it. As Dr. Weil says, you know, he laughs at people like me because I'm the one guy who didn't start when the famine comes, I'm dead first. You know, because I metabolize everything like that, but I'm gone. I mean, I'll be out of here because he's like, it's not fair. He can eat anything he wants, and granted I don't, but I could eat 2 pizzas and not gain a pound. But when that famine comes, I'm checked out within 2 days because I can't, you know. Yeah, I'm a shell as it is. Modern medicine has taught us that if you have a heart defect, you deal with the heart. You got a brain defect, you deal with the brain. You got an allergy defect, you deal with the allergist. Nobody's putting the whole picture together, you know. You have one problem, you go here, then you go here, then you go here, and your family doc's trying to put it all together, but we were never taught to keep it all under control. We're taught to manage 7 different drugs for 7 different diseases, but not look at the whole picture. integrative medicine, functional medicine says, let's look at the whole picture first and then deal with those things if we have to until we can fix it so the whole picture gets rid of those medicines. Everything is connected. The data's pouring it out. I'm going to show you one thing that's very cool. It is very naive for us to think now that we should be treating things as single entities. They're not. The whole body connects to itself. Everyone knows irritable bowel syndrome. You get nervous, what happens? Your gut goes crazy. Well, mind, gut, connected. There was a great study that recently just came out that showed us that when you exercise, instead of just burning calories, which we've always thought is the reason we lose weight, your bone cells physically talk to your pancreas and says, do a better job. Kid you not. Great study. The pancreas will release more insulin and have better receptor binding affinity, so your body will now deal with your glucose better if you exercise. Nature intended. You got to hunt down your darn food. Exercise, deal with it. Sitting on a couch watching a video game, eating a bag of chips, not going to do it. Pancreas doesn't work as well. What fits in your busy schedule better? Exercising 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day? I mean, you know, it's funny, but how many people in this room exercise? Great crowd. God, can't even stump anyone. All right. Usually I get like half the hands, but that's because it's mostly doctors. Oh, well, yeah. All right. Who wins? Darwin. You know, I love Homer Simpson. You know, running, you know, great thing. Sitting on the couch, not so good. You know, in the old days, natural selection took care of all the bad things. Truly. You know, you had a bad disease in the old days, you died young, you didn't reproduce, and the disease didn't continue. I mean, really. I mean, it's true. Now what do? We keep everything alive. Don't matter what it is. And if it gets to reproductive scenario, we're passing on something potentially that's problematic. So we're now repeating potential problems. Darwinian theory, which was a very good theory, was natural selection said you're not supposed to continue because that one wasn't as good. Not a humanistic theory, but it's a reality theory. So that's part of our problem again. Oh, this was the other one too. This is actually just a study. If anyone wants to actually get the study, it'll be on the site. It's in the journal Cell. Some of the best journals are not the normal medical journals, they're the really cool ones like Scientific American and Science and Cell. But this was the actual study that showed that the increased beta cells in the pancreas based on exercise. Now let me see, you've been visiting Dr. Lewis again. You know, exercising at the street corner. My wife gives me a hard time because, you know, oftentimes I'll be sitting anywhere and just doing things, stretching, calisthenics, sitting up against the wall, exercising because, you know, I'm busy. And I try and work it in any time I can. People see me, I don't know, probably see me running around town all the time at lunchtime. I take a small lunch break and I eat in 30 minutes and I run the rest of the time. Because when I get home, I have time for my kids and my wife, and it's a little hard to come home and say, hey, I'm going running. It doesn't really work very well. So, you know, one of these things is about what we choose. All right, nutritional environment, known for ages, Hippocrates. You know, great philosopher, 460 BC. Food is your best medicine, and the best food is the best medicine. The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will interest his patients in the care of the human frame, in diet, and the cause and prevention of disease. You know, Thomas Edison said that second part. That's powerful. That's what we need to be teaching people. Not the commercial that says, take your chicken wings, here's some Pepsi. Band-aid the problem until it gets so bad that you need a gastric surgery and worry about your esophageal cancer. That's what we teach people in this country. Very specific advice can be given to modify certain conditions. We've known this forever. Phenylketonuria. Cans of soda you see that say contains phenylalanine in it. Why? Because of that disease. They're missing an enzyme that breaks down phenylalanine. If they don't, it's neurotoxic, and the kids are messed up on everything, so they avoid it and they're doing well. This is easy nutritional information. You have gluten enteropathy. You can't tolerate gluten. You don't avoid gluten, you're fine. There's a lot of stuff out there that people don't know because we don't have the hard science yet. But in my clinic, if you go to a dermatologist, they'll tell you eczema has nothing to do with food. My nurse is sitting right here. Gretchen, she'll tell you how many kids walk into my office, I tell them, get them off dairy. 30 days later, kid comes back, eczema's gone. Dermatologist says it doesn't happen. Happens all the time. But when we're taught in medical school, food, nah, has nothing to do with it. It's not that important. Interesting. There it is. Finally, evidence at the DNA and cellular level. Keep hammering home the epigenetics. I love it. Learn that word. teach other people, help get them interested in this stuff. This is our grocery stores now. You know, where's the food? I mean, you go in Italy, if you're driving down the road in Italy and you stop off at a gas station, there's food. There's pasta and there's vegetables and stuff. You stop off at a convenient gas station anywhere in the United States, what do you get? Junk. You can't find anything healthy. Maybe a bag of nuts, maybe. And then who knows how long they've been sitting there with aflatoxin now, but you know, yeah, I'll ruin your diet. Hang out with me, I'll ruin your diet. Optimum diet in our current environment. Provide optimal health. Delay the onset of age-related diseases. Maximize longevity. These are all simple things. We all want these. Everyone wants to live a long time. Provide a positive state of health. Yeah, I like getting up every day. I got fortunate. I picked a great job. I love going to work. It's fun. Lucky. My favorite, compressed mortality. Dr. Weil's term. Maybe it's his term. He says it all the time, so I'm stealing it from him. Live, 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 drop dead. That's what I want. Don't give me live, 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 cancer, chemotherapy, surgery, cancer, therapy, drop dead. No, 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 no. You know, if anybody here sees me in the hospital with a tube, pull the plug. I said it here. I won't sue you. You're fine. Pull the plug. I'm done. Compressed mortality. I want to live, 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 healthy, mind working, talk to my grandkids when they come around, and I want to drop dead and then be fine. That's what we all want. Is that what's happening? It's the opposite now. Everything we're seeing now is uncompressed mortality. It is this just terrible watching people die slowly, and it's very sad. And it's all over the newspapers now. It's crippling the the economic machine. Guys like me are crippling the economic machine. I wish I didn't have to. I wish I wasn't spending as much time and effort treating all these kids with all these diseases. I would love it if every kid with asthma came in and ate a perfect diet. I probably wouldn't have to treat half of them, but I do. And I can't get half these moms to do what I ask them to. And so it comes from the society to teach. It comes from us screaming at the government to say, you know what, this food bill sucks. You're not giving us nearly enough money for our kids' school lunches, so they're eating turkey on a stick and all this other stuff. Libby Post here. Stand up, Libby. I want to applaud Libby. She is doing a phenomenal job for our school kids with no money extra. I mean, you should see the changes that she's working on. We've been having a great time together. But why aren't we getting money? Why is the government filling Monsanto's pocket for grain instead of, getting us red bell peppers? $5 for red bell pepper, 99 cents for a 2-liter can of Coke? A bottle of Coke. Crazy. Intended. This might rile some feathers. Any vegetarians? Put your hands up. Come on. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to offend all you. Anyone else? 1, 4, 5, 6. All right. Just be warned. I'm going to offend all of y'all. We were intended to breastfeed. God gave women 2 breasts, not for men, for babies. My wife thinks otherwise, but truly, I mean, breastfeeding is a great thing. Not enough moms breastfeed. It's too hard, I'm too busy, and here there's a guy saying this, sorry. But nonetheless, we really need to push more breastfeeding. It's natural, it's free, it's associated with less problems. We have canines. Why do we have canines? Everyone knows canines, right? Why do we have canines? Sorry, vegetarians. Yeah, it's not to eat bread or grains. It's to rip some darn meat. What's the difference? You're not supposed to rip meat 3-4 times a day. You had to hunt that darn deer down, kill him with a bow and arrow. You're sweating your butt off. You bring him home, you cut him up, you eat him slowly. Because you don't want to go out and run and kill him again. Now you drive down the street and you get your little, Big Mac, and you got meat here 4 or 5 times a day. That's a problem. China syndrome. T. Colin Campbell, great book, read it. Looked at rural China versus inner city China. Compared to animal protein intake. What's the most common animal protein? Anyone want to say that kids eat or drink? Cow milk. Okay? Beef, chicken. Tons of this stuff. Increased incidence of cancers, diseases with the more animal protein intake you have. I mean, there's multiple studies looking at this. Not the best thing on earth. And then you take our meat and you take it off the field and you feed it corn. We're going to get a little bit into that. I'm sorry, I'm going to bore you with that one too. But canines, we have them. You were meant to have nature. What did God intend? Eat some meat. Hunt for your food. You cannot get B12 without eating meat. Well, you can if you get a supplement, but that's not fair. Nature never intended you to get B12 from any other thing. You don't have B12 in your body, you eventually get B12 deficient, disease shows up. So sorry, vegetarians, again, but you were supposed to eat some meat. You can get away with it now because we're in the perfect society. Now you can do that good. But I'm a big fan of vegetarianism. But you need a little meat. Okay? And that's sort of what I am. I'm like 90% vegetarian now and 5 to 10% meat, mostly fish. Because after looking at all the data on there, you forget meat's not the way to go, and especially not milk. Sorry, Dairy Council. Atkins, brilliant guy, taught us some really great stuff. What did he teach us? You can lose weight by eating just meat. Okay? What did that prove? Fat and meat weren't the problem for weight. What's the problem? Carbs, sugar and flour. Drives insulin, gain weight, all the disease of metabolic problems. Atkins was brilliant to teach us that. Unfortunately, the Atkins diet, if anyone's on the Atkins diet, get off it tomorrow. Processing and technology. Technology is a good thing, but just like anything, it can turn into bad things. I think we've overprocessed our food. You take grain, pulverize it, throw away the germ and the endosperm. You're left with the white flour, add back vitamins and minerals, and then make it into white bread and eat it. Was that what we intended? That's why whole grain bread is better for you, because you actually get the whole darn thing. Why should you have to add back vitamins and minerals? Makes no sense. All right, processed food, instant cats. You know, I mean, everywhere you turn, it's like you go into these kids' school. My son goes to school, and my wife, thank God, is taking over the nutrition program there, and the kids are getting, fresh food and all this stuff. Unfortunately, for the public school kids, it's not fair because he's in a private school, so we can do this stuff. But the reality is, the stuff these kids are eating 5 days a week. It was pizza, fried food. They got it. I think it was Chinese junk one day. Like it was all lo mein with no veggies. I was like, I'm not sending my kid here. So they luckily let my wife come in and she revamped the whole program. And now the kids are getting 5 days a week meals, 2 provided by a chef from Charlotte who's providing only healthy stuff. My wife is running the entire program. There's no fried food, no junk anywhere. They don't get meat 5 days a week, and I'm happy, which is why she did it, I'm sure. But the reality is, how sad is that only those kids can get it? Why aren't the public school kids getting it? Talk to your senators, talk to your people. More people scream, eventually stuff happens. Look at that diet. Do we eat like that? 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 What's wrong with this picture? This is what our kids are eating. I go to a restaurant the other day. I'm sitting there with my wife, and I observe everything, which is a bad habit, but we're sitting at Brick's Pizza in Huntersville, and I sit down with my son and my daughter are eating salad, and then they're going to have a whole grain pizza that we ask them to do specially and whatever. And next to me is a mom who's eating salad, and her 4 kids have pasta with Alfredo sauce. Now, if you're going to eat your salad, now if she had pasta with Alfredo sauce, I'd say fine. It's just the whole family screwed up. But if she's sitting there and she's eating a salad, why is she allowing her children to eat that? And what's the answer?
It's easy.
No. Parenting. We have abdicated parenting. I am appalled at the parenting I see in my clinic. And I'm actually, again, people know me, I'm a jerk when it comes to this kind of stuff. If your kid's acting out in my clinic, I will take your kid and sit him down and tell him to stop. In front of you. If it offends you, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to allow it. Because I'm going to set an example for that child what authority is. And I'm going to love him at the end. I'm going to give him a big hug on the way out the door, but he's not going to do that in front of his mother. And I'll tell him, you don't treat your mom like that in front of me. And I'll look at their mom and say, you shouldn't let him treat you like that. Back in the old days, these kids didn't do this stuff. If I did that, now I'm not advocating this, but if I did that, my mom took a wooden spoon, and I remember the day my mom broke the last wooden spoon in her thing. And I was whistling Dixie. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. What do you think the next day happened? 16 new wooden spoons. I grew up in both my parents were born in war-torn Poland. My mom actually has a swastika on her birth certificate. So there's a very different generational Stuff going on there. Now, I'm not advocating at all corporal punishment. I don't ever spank my children. Thank God I don't need to, because they spend enough time in timeout that they don't get out of trouble. Great study, American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, 2007, volume 86. This is awesome. Inflammation. All right. Inflammation is the root of all of our problems. Every disease you can think of, inflammation is what's going on. Alzheimer's, coronary artery disease, diabetes. There's a genetic defect that occurs, epigenetic or not, then you end up with a problem. Inflammation takes over problems. Asthma, purely inflammatory disease. Take this study. They took adult men, gave them a high-fat diet, 50 grams of fat. Anyone have an idea what 50 grams of saturated fat is? 3 chicken wings, 3 pieces of bread with butter slathered on it, half a stick. That's 50 grams, okay? So I gave these guys this and said, okay, let's see what happens. Low-grade endotoxemia. In your bloodstream, gram-negative bacteria, E. coli, these bacteria that are floating will release these things called lipopolysaccharides. There are these fat sugar molecules in response to inflammation, something that's going wrong in the body. So a bad food type. And they released this stuff, and they actually measured it. And they found out that when these guys ate this high-fat diet, they had a huge increase in lipopolysaccharide. What else happened? Coronary artery disease. So why do these guys always drop dead after they eat a high-fat meal or go exercise? 2 reasons cardiac guys always show up in the ER. They just came from a nice big 35-ounce steak at so-and-so's, you eat it, you can pay, we don't pay for it kind of thing. And he shows up dead. This is why. They're proving it. Increased inflammatory cytokine release. Cytokines are proteins, like I said, protein everywhere. Cytokines are proteins that are cell signals. They tell cells to do certain things. These guys got increased, caused disease. Okay? Red wine, olive oil reverse this effect. The lion hypothesis. Everyone heard about that lion study, Lyon, France? Why are the French able to eat saturated cheeses, red wine, all this stuff, and they live longer than Americans? Why are the Japanese eating some stuff and living longer than Americans? Why are the Italians eating, red wine and all this kind of food that's, rich in olive oil and fats and stuff, and they're living longer than us? Some people say it's just because we're American, that's why we die fast. The reality is that certain diets are protective. Red wine, olive oil, natural. There's good things in them. There's these things called phytonutrients. All right, chronic low-level inflammation, I already said that. Jungle effect. Anyone read the book Jungle Effect? Anyone read the book Blue Zones? Anyone watch Oprah? Nobody watches Oprah? It's like the only part of the world where Oprah's not being watched. Somebody's got to write this up. This is... Oh, with TiVo now? That's an excuse? Come on. Jungle Effect and the Blue Zones were 2 books that sort of looked at this theory. You go to the jungle. Old British medical doctors would go to the jungles of Africa and do medical research. They couldn't find cancer. Couldn't find heart disease. Couldn't find diabetes. Why? I mean, the genetic predisposition's there. You take those same Africans that are living in that jungle and you move them to New York City, within 10 years, they've got diabetes potentially. And this has been looked at. Epigenetics. The genetics are the same. You didn't change it. The book of life is identical. All of a sudden, now you move them to a new area, environmental mismatch, boom. Jungle Effect says if you live in the jungle and you eat jungle-type food, you live long and healthy. Blue Zones. 7 places in the world where the number of centenarians is the highest. Everyone knows what a centenarian is, right? Septenarians, octenarians, people who are numbers of 10 old. So centenarians, 100-year-olds. The most 100-year-olds in the world reside in 7 places. Seventh-day Adventists in La Jolla, California, I think it is. There's a place in Ecuador, Okinawa, Crete. They looked at these places. What's the common theme for all these environments? What's the common theme? Diet, village mentality, social support networks. Huge. American system is anti-social support networks now. Churches are a great thing. Family networks are a great thing. Schools, friends, that stuff's huge, it's helpful. Daily exercise. The Blue Zones show that Oprah did, which I never watch Oprah, my wife was like kicking, you gotta see this, you gotta, so I watched it. It's actually very cool. The guy was 95 years old, Ecuadorian guy. He looked like he was 60, muscles, raking his front yard. And they asked him, how do you, he said, oh, every day I just get up and do it, do my thing. It's amazing. How can that guy do it and we can't? We're dropping dead, much younger. You know, there's a lot to this. And then the fourth thing is not as much exposure to environmental toxins. But that being said, take this study. There's a great article in New England Journal of Medicine, 2003, J.F. Bach, B-A-C-H. Great article to read about a belief system on autoimmunity. It's about hygiene hypothesis. At the end of the Berlin, at the end of the, when the Berlin Wall came down, the unification of Germany was very interesting. Old Germany, East Germany, was very polluted. West Germany, advanced society, was less polluted. And they looked at the onset and disease prevalence of asthmatics. And they found, interestingly enough, there were more asthmatics and sicker disease in Western society than in East Germany, where the pollution was much worse. So it can't be just environmental toxins. So they looked and said, wow, hygiene hypothesis, clean environment. You know, immune system not priming, well, that's a whole other lecture, which I'd be glad to give you guys. But the reality is, there's a lot to this. Environmental toxins are huge, but there's a way to combat that. Food, good things. Anti-inflammatory diet. I give handouts of this diet handout to almost every patient that I see, every mother. And I'm praying that most of them do it. If I get 1 out of 10, I'm happy. But I would love it if they all did it. This diet, as far as I'm concerned, it's not a diet. It's a way of healthy eating. And we can do an anti-inflammatory, that's another 2-hour lecture, but this is what I wish everyone would do, because this is, I think, the best way for longevity and health. Can you do it? Will you do it? Why have I not heard about this before? Probability is because it's not a fad weight loss diet. And that's what everyone pays attention to. Everyone wants to know, how do I lose weight? Because that's all we care about. What do we look like in the mirror? Atkins, people do it all the time, not worrying about the fact that the consequences of the disease issues that might come from eating meats all the time. It's all about losing weight. So it's probably why this isn't as mainstream as it should be. But it's out there. Gory science, sorry. Omega-6, omega-3s. Everyone sees their eggs now, says contains omega-3s. Everyone's hearing about fish oil. Everyone's hearing about all these things. Fatty acid profiles. Your brain, your body needs fatty acids to survive. Okay? If you don't have it, these essential fatty acids, you will die. Your brain won't work, your immune system won't work, everything will go bad. Omega-6 fats, we have a ton of. Vegetable oils, meats, and eggs. Everyone knows we get tons of vegetable oil. I mean, canola, soy, everywhere you turn. Look at every product on the market that's processed and find soy in there, high fructose corn syrup. Bread. We tried to find bread without soybean oil in it. It's almost impossible. I think it was one Pepperidge Farm brand that didn't have soybean or high fructose corn syrup in it. It was like impossible. This stuff has permeated society. Everywhere you turn. Omega-6 sources. Canola oil, soybeans, fish, and come to me, flaxseed. Omega-3 fatty acids we're getting deficient in. In the old days, this ratio used to be somewhere around 4-to-1, 3-to-1, 2-to-1, 1-to-1 if you lived in Inuit Eskimos, who ate mostly food that's high in this, which was fish and some meats, but very low in oils of any other kind. The ratio now, anyone want to guess? Fold of 10. 20, 30, 40-to-1. Okay? Who cares? What does that mean? This is the world of inflammation. This is asthma. For the last 30 years, the United States pharmaceutical industries and the European pharmaceutical industries have been developing drugs to treat this problem. Steroids block here, COX-1, COX-2 inhibitors, your Vioxx, your Celebrex, aspirin, nonsteroidals, Singulair, you name the drug, it's trying to stop this reaction. Arachidonic acid is the major precursor to inflammation. You need this. You just don't need so much of it. Okay? On the other side, omega-3s, icosapentaenoic acid, docosahexaenoic acid, brain function, immune system function, deficiencies. A study came out looking at pregnant women, postpartum depression risk, elevated in a large population of women. So they looked at it and said, all right, let's give them omega-3 fatty acids as fish oil. Let's look at their postpartum depression risk. 50% reduction in one study. That's a deficiency. It's like vitamin D deficiency. It's a problem. Your brain doesn't get enough. It can't function well. It's an issue. I think it's an issue in all of our kids, ADHD, all these neurodevelopmental problems. It's a problem. Where would we like to get that from more often? Fish. But in the absence of ability to get fish, I often recommend fish oil. So Bottom line is, this is a problem. This is part of the anti-inflammatory diet. You want to shift more towards getting some of these and shift away from getting these, and primarily, it's your vegetable oils. You want to reduce your consumption of soy, corn, and vegetable oils of all kinds. I mean, obviously you want to get rid of trans fats and those things, but you want to increase, if you're going to increase any oil, in replacement of that, it would be canola oil, monounsaturated fatty oils like olive oil, especially extra virgin olive oil, which is the least processed, healthiest. A lot of phytonutrients. My madness, the only reason I put this up here is to show that vitamin D has an effect on immune system, omega-3s effect on immune system, multiple pieces to this puzzle that all end up with the same problem. Okay, these are just 2 pieces. I've got another slide that's more and more and more coming to light now. We're starting to realize that the immune system is really falling apart by many, 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 many different problems. Components of the anti-inflammatory diet, varied. This is getting back to your question. You don't want to eat monotonic foods. You don't want to eat the same thing every single day. Your body wasn't meant to eat the same thing every single day. That's why you don't get oranges all year long. Oranges grow and you eat them during the orange season. And then in the wintertime when foods are scarce, you eat the foods that you can store. That was intended. That was what makes sense. We do a lot of things now that don't make a lot of sense. We have stuff grow in cultures where it's the summertime and they fly it up here, waste a lot of gas and oil and everything like that, which is a huge problem. Get it up here and we eat it. Okay? You must cover all your nutritional needs. You want it to be low in processed foods. Obviously, processed is fast. You want it to be high in fruits and vegetables with rich color. What color is your diet? Dave Heber wrote a great book about the effects of phytonutrients on your genes called Nutrigenomics, Nutrition Genomics. What color is your diet? The more fruits and vegetables you have in your diet, the more likelihood you are to have vitamins, minerals, and all these other things your epigenome needs to function properly. If you get burgers and fries all day long, what are the odds you're going to get a lot of vitamins and minerals? Not too good. Low glycemic foods. Everyone understand glycemia? Probably not. I'm going to do it very quickly. Glycemic index is essentially how fast a carbohydrate turns to a simple sugar. Okay, so if you eat a white piece of bread, it turns to sugar like that. If you eat a rice cake is probably one of the worst diet foods on earth. Really, truly. It turns to sugar very quickly. And what changes how it turns to sugar quickly is how much fiber and other things are associated with it. So if you eat bread with lots of beans, okay, that white bread won't digest as fast. But if you take a piece of white bread, roll it up into a little ball and swallow it, it turns to sugar like that, like a piece of candy. High fiber foods are good. Monounsaturated fatty acids, again, are good. Olive oil, canola oil, extra virgin preferably. Mediterranean food pyramid, okay? Good food pyramid. I'm not a big fan of the American Dietetic Association food pyramid because I think it's adulterated by the industries that promote it. I am a big fan of this. And then I'll show you the anti-inflammatory diet pyramid. Huge volumes of the good stuff. And again, notice how the grains are all whole grains. We don't want processed grains, we want whole grains. You got olive oil, you got a little slice of cheese and stuff there, but nowhere do you see a milk layer. You know, fish, poultry, sweets a little bit, red meat a few times, once a month, fine. This is the anti-inflammatory diet pyramid by Dr. Weil. And he reversed, and that's the reason I like this even better, is he reversed these 2 layers and put vegetables and fruits on the bottom. I'm convinced that I think that's the best way to go because I think that's where you're going to get most of your phytonutrients, which is what you want in life. And then you got your healthy fats, you got your fish and seafood, whole soy foods, Asian mushrooms. He puts a layer in there because there's a huge amount of data coming out now that Asian mushrooms have very, very powerful anti-cancer effects, especially enoki, shiitake, maitake mushrooms. The actual worst mushroom on earth is, anyone want to guess? White button mushroom. The one we put on all of our salads and pizzas. It's got 3 toxins in it, 2 of which can be detoxified by cooking, 1 which can't. And if you eat them raw, it's potentially not a great thing. They're studying that too. And then tea, EGCG, epigallocalcium gallate, hard word to say, anti-cancer effects. University of Arizona Cancer Center is actually studying, and they're finding a lot of data on green tea and its effects in preventing cancer. Lots of stuff coming out of the Japanese society too, because that's again what they use mostly. And then you got your layer of supplements. Again, that's there for those who need it, but I would preferably say nature first. This is just a little slide on putting it all together very simply. Genetics, deterministic model, environmental factors, epigenetic model, development of disease, hyperinsulinemia. Hyperinsulinemia is a driver of all things bad. It's what makes people fat. Insulin is the marker of how you gain weight. If your insulin is kept in check, you don't gain weight. If your insulin goes high, you deposit fat and you gain weight. And then look at all the diseases that come out of dysregulated insulin. Everything revolves around insulin. It's a major, major hormone. It's a major, major problem.